Well, we're just going to give it a couple of extra minutes while people grab a coffee and join the meeting. So we'll probably start just about 2 or 3 minutes time. Well, I think we'll get going as we had pretty good attendance already. Thank you for joining the webinar. We are going to run through a number of slides around VMware and the AWS approach. I think we'll just crack into introductions and kind of get onto it because it's quite a meaty subject and there's quite a lot of slides to get through. So the webinar will be recorded. We'll send it out afterwards. If you have any questions as you go along, just pop them in the chat and the moderator will quickly get those to us. But otherwise, thank you for joining and we shall begin. So first of all, let's do a quick round of introductions. We'll go in top to tail order. So Colin, would you like to give yourselves a quick introduction?
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Colin Barker. I'm the head of AWS at Expert Thinking. I'm also an AWS ambassador and lead certification SME and community builder as well. So I helped build the AWS practice here at AWS from the ground up. And essentially my role is essentially to guide consultants in facilitating the workshops, understanding customers, your needs, and sort of building AWS strategies from there. So my prior experience comes from managing infrastructure and security for multiple data centers and then getting into the cloud just over 10 years ago, specifically AWS.
Mike?
Thank you. Hi there. So I'm Mike Bevan. I've been at AWS just coming to 5 years. And my role is I'm the executive lead for the UK public sector, which means I manage a lot of strategic engagements and initiatives, one of which is the One Government Value Agreement, which I'll talk to you a bit about later. My background is mainly kind of large-scale transformation programs on the borders of technology and business. I ran the UK's digital transformation program from 2011 to 2015 as part of the sort of first incarnation of GDS. And I've done a lot of large-scale projects in banking, energy and asset management, things like that as well. So that's me.
Thanks, Mike. So I'm Ross. I'm the Director of Sales here at Expert Thinking. I probably wear two main hats. One, I manage the sales teams here, but I also manage a lot of the partner relationships. We have a really strong partner ecosystem here with most of the top 10 partners in the UK, VARs and resellers, working with us on AWS and data projects. So I know there's a number of partners on the call, which is totally fine. So if any of the partners on the call would like to have a chat after, please reach out. And it's always about the power of three in terms of AWS, as Mike knows that terminology. So in essence, kind of working in a partner ecosystem or working directly with customers, of course, is always important. So to set the scene, first of all, from an expert thinking point of view, we're not like any other cloud consultancy. That's our kind of badge. What we mean by that is we feel like we're much more strategic in nature. We highlight and kind of operate in certain verticals really strongly. Commercial and public sector in the UK is kind of our two real kind of main goes to. But also we have a range of services across kind of 4 areas. So range from cloud platforms, thinking things like landing zones, cloud platform migrations, etc. DevSecOps and DevOps, cloud automation, seeing this as a really, really growing market at the moment. Cloud data and AI. We couldn't have a slide without the word AI on it, could we? But in essence, AI at the moment, I think certainly with most of the customers we're working to, it's become more of a reality in terms of data. where AI itself is kind of a useful term, I think, for the market, but actually it's driving huge amounts of data conversations, and AWS certainly leading the way in that at the moment, and certainly with some of the announcements over the last couple of weeks, it's been really interesting time. And cloud migration, so probably where this kind of topic is going to kind of run into more and more. We're doing multiple assessments and multiple migrations at the moment within public sector, health, county councils, working with those companies to either look at a kind of hybrid model, so look at DR in the cloud, or secondary data centers in the cloud, or actually wholesale migrations. We're seeing more and more of that actually to AWS, whereas the cost of on-premise is kind of spiraling. And so with some of the funding programs that AWS have, which we'll get into later, it's been a really successful kind of 18 months with AWS in terms of wholesale migrations into AWS. So in terms of us and why public sector, we're just throwing some names up there. These are active names. These are stuff customers we are working on as we speak, or have worked on within the last kind of 6 months. We have a massive track record within public sector, and that includes councils and NHS, but also in the Quango third sector as well. So again, for those on the call who are from councils and NHS trusts, multiple case studies, multiple references, and also your AWS account manager will be very happy to kind of run through some of that stuff as well. I'm not going to dwell too much on this slide. You'd hope from a partner perspective that we knew what we were doing if we were going to run a joint AWS webinar. So I hope that's kind of a given. Really, this is where I'm going to kind of hand over to Colin, really, in terms of kind of why VMware Broadcom acquisition and the response that ourselves and AWS have put together.
No problem. No, so let's have a look at this. It's a new reality. VMware itself, post acquisition. So if we have a look at this, we know that Broadcom acquired VMware in around November 2023, and in doing so, Broadcom made some sort of very significant changes to the way that their licensing is held together, pushing more people into the subscription model, including a lot more within that same subscription model. And that kind of had a knock-on effect. So, as we can sort of see here, that, generally around the globe, more than anything else, is that we're seeing the renewal prices increase by an average of about 300%. And a couple of examples I found just from the news itself were things like the London Learning Grid and not-for-profit saw that 268% increase in cost, and the London's mayor offered us some policing a cry, saw a significant financial addition to that. So what's happening in the world is that a lot of people are essentially considering different ways of what to do next. You've got these sort of hefty VMware environments on site. They're all tied in for a certain amount of time, and those renewals are coming up. And what you're left with is a huge sort of opportunity to sort of move forward. But you've kind of then got to think about the skills, the people within that side of things as well. And as such, it sort of introduces business uncertainty as well. It's like, well, what are you going to do in the future? And I think you've got these different ways of doing things, of which hopefully I'll go into in a second, but we can sort of talk about some of the different ways to move from here. So if we go on to the next slide. Cool. So this is one of the wonderful things about migrating into the cloud and looking at the different ways forward, is that actually you hear this quite a lot with other people. You can make cost savings when moving to the cloud. And one of the key reasons that could work is that capex of buying just the VMware license itself can be mitigated, moving away from your sort of lengthy renewals into more on-demand licensing as well. So it can help with budgeting as well. And as such, you're kind of reducing that sort of maintenance cost as well, mainly because you're not buying all that sort of additional hardware through capital expenditure. You're sort of allowing a bit more sort of management of your on-premise infrastructure to be handed over to the cloud providers as well. But then you get the standard ones as well, like scalability and flexibility. AWS in itself offers virtually unlimited scalability. So the idea is that rather than having to wait for you to have that need immediately, or you're considering your way forward, you could just very quickly spin up new compute and get yourself up and running through that as well. And yeah, through AWS as well, there's the enhanced security. Definitely, the improved access to the HSCN network is a key one that we found throughout a lot of our engagements with customers as well. But then it can offer you things like the innovation, agility, as Ross just talked about as well, the disaster recovery, business continuity options. You don't have to sort of go wholesale in one go, and this is where the multiple options really come into play. And I kind of wanted to sort of go over those first to kind of show you the next slide, which is actually the AWS's sort of 7 R's of migration. And I'll quickly sort of go into this and sort of give you an overview, because a lot of you probably hear now about the 6 R's for migrations, but the one at the very top there is one that's sort of very specific to the sort of process we're going through at the moment, which is the relocate option as well. So the relocate option offers up an additional pathway to sort of getting into the cloud quicker, whilst also helping on that modernization pathway as well. The one thing I've always sort of disliked about this diagram is that actually once you hit production, there should be a loop back to the beginning again, because your migration never stops once you're in production. So you always want to modernize, move forward, bring things up, and eventually get to the point where you're refactoring your code. But this is where it could work both ways. A lot of the time, especially with the VMware cost increases that are coming into play, that's coming up really soon. You need to make your decisions quickly. You don't really have the time to sit there and refactor every application to become cloud native in that sort of first instance. So that's where that top option comes into play. And the relocate option is about moving your solutions, your VMs from one place to another, but using a similar platform for that process. And that sort of familiarity, that sort of similarity with your on-premise platforms as well, can allow you that sort of slightly longer process to start skilling people up. I know that a lot of people, when migrating into the cloud, are worried about that sort of sudden increase in the need to skill up, whereas this allows you that nice sort of phased approach whilst you're still taking the opportunity to have the benefits of running in the cloud, that cost savings, cost agility mainly, and that sort of ability to get hold of the unlimited amount of compute that's available from there as well. As you can see, it gives you the option as well to see, well, actually, do you really need the stuff anymore? Could you retain it on top? More likely retire as well. So I want to sort of concentrate more on that sort of relocate option, as you can see here, because within the sort of native space and the relocation options, we've got 3 very different ways of migrating into AWS. And as you can see by this diagram, there are 3 options that can exist for you, especially on the VMware side of things. So we talk about the AWS native approach, because normally when people are migrating to the cloud, this is essentially what people first think of when migrating over to the cloud. It's the whole, oh, we need to suddenly make a huge amount of change from there. So its deployment model is, you're on AWS, you're using AWS, you've moved across, you need to skill up and from there. It is absolutely great to work closer with the AWS services, because once you're using those services, you're actually using the more cost-effective method to go. But there's your problem. You've got a lot of sort of modernization you have to do, and that modernization will slow a migration into the cloud. So we do have these 2 additional options on the side, and that's AWS EVS, which is the Elastic VMware Service, which has come in to replace the AWS VMware on Cloud AWS option. And Nutanix has a hyperconverged infrastructure on AWS called NC2, and that's their sort of way of moving forward into there. And the 2 options actually give you that sort of relocate option. So if you're using Nutanix on premises, for example, you can spin up a Nutanix cluster in AWS and quite literally use the tools and move it across, and it's a familiar interface that you can have as well. Same with EVS as well, the Elastic VMware Service. The whole point is it enables you to have that VMware interface you're used to as well. But with the Elastic VMware Service, you're no longer tied into your sort of 3-year-long expensive licensing. The licensing in this case is on demand. So it's as long as you keep the EVS cluster up and running, it'll expand, it can shrink based on some minimum and maximum requirements, but ultimately, you've got that sort of unlimited capacity to work. So you've got these two options that can allow you to very quickly get your on-premise data center into AWS. And again, that's what Ross mentioned before. You can also use it as a DR option as well. Both of these options offer up unique capabilities. And we have a case study later on that I'm hopefully going to get a chance to go through, which can show where we're using some of the unique capabilities within these platforms to meet and resolve the problems of migrating the cloud, specifically in this case, a healthcare organization from there. Cool. So if you move on to the next slide. So within ET, we've got this proven process to get in there. So our standard process of working is we meet with you first. We have that joint session with all of us to explore, what you actually need. We are here to decide and help make recommendations to you on what is the best process for you. So we will take that chance to work through a number of assessments with you to align the strategy of our strategy and your strategy together to understand what the best way forward is, to align our goals. As you can see, there are three actually options on that thing: DC retirement, disaster recovery, innovation as well. That can take any form, and that's where we can come in and help them help you understand what that pathway can look like and take into account things like speed, license expirations, on-premise skills, all that kind of stuff as well. And also, the option for a POC, which again, coming to our case study later on, is an option that we use. The idea is that, if you're not quite sure it's going to work, well, let's get this option to go into a POC. And there is funding available from AWS to help mitigate some of that sort of cost to run a POC as well. So there's a chance for you to actually see that in action as part of this assessment process as well. And then the idea is we work collaboratively to deliver the migration with you. And that's kind of where we both share knowledge, expertise with you. The idea is we work with you as a team, one team to get you into the cloud. And that entire process can be quite easily seen on the next slide, which we can talk about one of the sort of funding options that we have, which is the AWS MAP process. So the MAP is the sort of AWS Migration Acceleration Program. And I realize, I've been talking for quite a bit, so do want to remind people there is a Q&A section as well. So feel free to put any questions you might have on there. If you let us know while I'm chatting as well, we can always have a look at them. And if anything comes through, I can answer on the fly. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask as well. So I wanted to sort of highlight the MAP opportunity to you, mainly because within the MAP space, the idea is that there is a number of three different elements to this and three different ways of getting essentially some funding from AWS to be able to help mitigate some of that sort of cost of coming into play. Starting with that sort of assess phase, the idea is we're working with you to understand you as a company, understand you from a technical perspective, understand how we can get you that financial output, that business case for change, to understand for you what you would need to do, what you need to say, and actually prove that we can pull you in and get you onto the cloud as well. And in most cases, we can get most of that, if not all of it, funded by AWS to get you that option from there. And the whole point is that gives you a business case. That gives you something that you can take internally to whoever needs to see this, with all of the numbers that needed. It comes up with plans on how we're going to move forward and how we're going to work together to show the cost benefit of migrating into the cloud.
I think what's key there, Colin, is that the three options you laid out early doors, those EVS, Nutanix, and your native options. Within that assessment process, we can take you through the various pros, cons, and costs key in terms of those options, and that's been really, really useful, for all of our public sector customers, where it does generally derive something that is useful. This isn't a a 2-page kind of tick box exercise. It's actually quite an in-depth piece of work, which includes stakeholder decks and presentations. But in essence, it gives you a really good cost view as well as innovation view, doesn't it? So I think it's been really, really good for us using the MAP funding route for, well, let's be honest, for the majority of our customers recently.
Exactly, and the one thing I will say as well is, as much as I've got AWS on the line for this one as well, is that each of those breaks in the pathway that you see allow you to make that decision yourself. You're not then forcefully committed to move on to the next phase. So the assess there is to give you that business case for change, and if for whatever reason you decide not to, no hard feelings. Ultimately, our goal is to get you through all of these processes and through all of these stages as well. So we will make the business cases as compelling as we can to get you on there, but we'll also base that on facts and truth as well. If something is not suitable for you, we'll put that forward. And as Ross mentioned before, we've got these different options. We can look into that as well. And that's, again, where we kind of fit this sort of mobilize phase right in the middle. The idea is that from the assessment, you're not going to immediately migrate. You possibly could. It depends on what you do. But the mobilize phase is about taking that one step further, of understanding what that sort of detailed level is going to look like. But also the people, the skills, culture, change leadership. That for me is one of the key ones, where we're actually looking at you and then from a skills perspective, but also bringing you along for that journey as well. And within that mobilize phase, we'll get the platform ready to go. We'll get your landing zone in place. We'll actually start doing pilot migrations as part of it. Actually start bringing some of your production environments live into AWS beyond the POC side of things as well. And then you've got the migrate and modernize phase, which ultimately that's where that sort of circular bit comes into play. You migrate across, you can then start to modernize. You're all in one place. You've then got that ability to scale up and down as required, so that once you have done a piece of modernization, maybe a year, 2 years down the line, you can just switch off what you need, and that's it. Licenses stop, get paid for, that kind of stuff from there. But MAP is just one of many funding programs available for you. MAP is the process as if you're moving from somewhere on-premise or another cloud into AWS. We've got that in play. But we've got other programs, the VMware modernization accelerators, the Windows modernization accelerators, optimization licensing assessments, got the well architecture review. But there was one other program that's very unique to public sector customers that I would like to sort of bring Mike in to have a chat to now, which I will let Mike do the introductions on this additional program.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. So I'm going to talk a bit more about sort of commercial and organizational things, I guess, that can kind of help make your journey a bit easier. So the One Government Value Agreement has been around coming up to about 5 years now. We're in its second iteration. So it's called OGVA 2 is what it's currently referred to, and that started in November 2023, and we are in the process of discussing the next phase of this, which will come into place in November 2026. So it's an ongoing thing. If we could just skip on a slide, please, there. So what this thing is, it is a memorandum of understanding between AWS and the Crown Commercial Service. And the whole point of it is to really treat the UK government as one customer. And that's the real broad sense of public sector as well. It's not just kind of government departments. It includes local government, healthcare, not-for-profit organisations, educational organisations, the government departments and all their sort of arm's length bodies. And by treating them as one customer, what that means, if you are Ada and Worthing District Council or you're the Home Office, you get access to the same level of discounts, the same level as credits, the same level as training, and the same level of kind of technical support and assistance. So it is really looking to kind of have a very level playing field. And one real important aspect of this is to try and drive innovation in the public sector. And we realise that this is a challenge, but we've tried to come up with a set of features that help drive that. And we also really want to help guide customers through the sort of cloud adoption journey as well. And that's using our partners who are really key to this, but also access to any sort of AWS expertise. We can do that in support of the kind of the cloud first policy that's been around now for coming up to like 14 years, to try and make that happen better. So as the slide says here, let's overcome barriers for innovation. Let's deal with skilling. Let's make sure we're using stuff in the best way, and let's see if we can kind of save money on technology to fund other things. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So of course, that all sounds nice and easy, doesn't it? But I've worked in the public sector myself. I know these things are not quite as straightforward as they seem, and there are a bunch of things that can make it hard to achieve change. A lot of organisations face top-down goals, which don't necessarily prioritise technology, best use of technology, efficient use of technology. They're sometimes implied in there, but not always the headline kind of story. There's still a lot of legacy technology around in any organisation, and I always kind of resist people beating up the public sector on this front. I've worked in many private sector organisations who have just as much legacy technology. So that's another thing that needs to be overcome. And then also, there are skills gaps in both retaining people, attracting people, and helping them be motivated to use the latest technology and maybe let go of some of the things that they've kind of grown up with, been used to doing, see a lot of their kind of equity in the organisation around the things that they know. So these are all kind of barriers, and OGVA really helps to try and unlock some of those by bringing in, as I say, a set of features that will help you move forward in that space. If we can go on to the next one, please. So, yeah, the real point of this thing across a lot of the public sector is to help you get things moving. Now, it's interesting because within public sector, there is a vast array of different states of maturity in terms of digital cloud adoption, the level of technical skills that are available to them. But what we recognize is that sometimes getting started is the really hardest place of all, to get that first project under your belt, to earn some trust, to actually earn some belief as well. So we think OGVA is particularly useful in just getting things started in a low cost and a low risk way. So providing different types of funding and support and being able to actually enable and train people within the public sector, you can kind of get that first thing under your belt and start to actually get some kind of belief and hope that you can start to move forward. Next slide, please. And the places we see it used, it is quite widespread, and we've got sort of 5 kind of example use cases here. So we see sort of tech teams within organizations actually using it as a way to just experiment with cloud. We sometimes see people who've moved out of larger government departments into more regional parts of government, where they may be very heavily on-premise data centers. So it means that they can get access to some funding and training to do a quick experiment to show to their leadership what can be done. Then there's quite simple things like just basically training up staff and then enabling them to access some of the partner expertise and the AWS expertise to make the existing cloud environments work better. Then one thing that we hear a lot from commercial colleagues is actually, because this is a Crown Commercial Services MOU, and because it's plugged heavily into the Crown Commercial Services frameworks, it means for procurement people, it gives them a very sound compliant procurement route. So it dovetails nicely into any procurement work they're doing. Then also in terms of, if you're thinking more strategically, they have access to the best practice that our partners, because they have a lot of experience in doing work in the cloud space, but also to AWS experts such as our professional services teams, our technical account managers, who can actually help them define a better cloud strategy and again make more effective use. And lastly, and probably most importantly, to kind of package all that together to deliver transformational projects. So actually having sort of the guidance, resources, the good security features that we've touched on already, we can actually deliver those projects within the public sector that realise benefits for citizens, businesses, whatever constituents the organisation's dealing with. Next slide, please. So who's it for? We talked a bit about what it is. So if we go on to the next slide. So we look at this in two kind of broad areas, touching back onto the area of maturity. So we have some people who are looking to maybe just tackle a specific problem or starting to get into trying to accelerate what they're doing in the cloud space with AWS. And we see different people. So they could be business or technical decision makers who are looking to access some new ways of operating and working. They could be technical teams and builders who are looking to actually get their hands on more cost effective, more flexible and more resilient technology. Or they could actually be looking at something very vertically specific within their business. So it could be like the head of children's services or something like the local council is actually looking for a prescribed solution that they're looking to solve with a pre-solved type of problem. So if we go on to the next slide. So the tier we have here is called Cloud Scaler, and this is a very simple entry-level tier. It requires no commitment. It doesn't even require a heavy contractual commitment other than the means by which you access your first AWS account, and this gives you access to credits, so you can actually build for free on AWS. It's underpinned by that same MOU. It gives you access to 5 AWS Skill Builder licenses, so you can actually start to train up your staff. And if needed, you can access one of our professional services workshops. And there's 7 different type of workshops, which range from quite leadership type things around a thing called Cloud Journey Simulation, which is kind of like a gamified way where you can look at making different decisions and deploying different resources and what it would mean to your organization, through much more technical things around, you know, how effectively you're configured. And this can be tailored depending on what you need, and it requires no spend commitment, no contractual commitment. It's something that you can kind of try out. Next slide, please. And then the other type of customers we typically see are people who are either established or they've kind of committed that they're going to have a strategy that relies on AWS to be a cloud provider for them. These are some of the larger central government departments who are quite mature. Some of those have been on cloud for like 10 years now. We're seeing healthcare providers like NHS trusts and the central NHS bodies in there. Some of the education institutions like not just the universities, but also some of the cross-industry bodies like JISC. And then we're seeing a growing band of local authorities now who are looking to do everything from tackling on-prem data centers through to actually securing some of their data stores, and now starting to do work in the analytics space as well. So next slide, please. So for these customers, we have a thing called Cloud Prime. So this is a committed level. So this requires a 3-year commitment, and that gives access to discounts, which are the best available in the public sector that CCS have negotiated with us. It also gives access to a much higher level of credits, $250,000 worth of credits for larger types of projects. Still underpinned by the MOU, has a much larger training offer with 25 skill builder licenses and matched giving, essentially, if you want to expand out of that. So we see some government departments with 200 to 300 kind of training seats in play to train up their staff. Then we can get into more specialized solutions with our partners. And then we have a bunch of kind of annual things like cost optimization, sustainability, and some security deep dives, part of our SIP program, which is underneath there, yeah. And say the discounts on some of our other services like incident detection and response. So this is a much more rich tier, but this does require a commitment and a bit more buy-in from the organization. Next slide, please. So all of this can be done with AWS partners, which is one of the reasons why I'm here with Expert Thinking today, is because we really want to see our partners, because our partners are quite well focused in the public sector. A lot of the staff and our partners have worked in public sector, so they know it really well, so they have that really good focus. The other real challenge that we see is that the sort of skills and knowledge around technology and how you apply it in the public sector is something that isn't always present in the organizations themselves. So the partners can bring in this extra guidance and support and knowledge to help close that skills gap in a short-term space. And if you think as well around some of these migratory type actions, some of those are a one-time exercise where you move something from A to B. So you don't really necessarily want to bring that skill set into your organization. You want to learn more about how you run it more effectively, how you exploit it, how you can build better public services afterwards. So the partners can really help bridge that gap of migration, which is really important. Then you get support in actually managing the environments once you've moved and how to operate those better. And of course, this then promotes a competitive sort of supplier ecosystem as well. So it's not all about us, but it's actually about a bunch of often many UK-based organisations working with the public sector. Partners can then run proof of concepts on behalf of customers using those credits that we provide as part of OGVA. And then finally, there is the thing called AWS Marketplace, which I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail today, but people who have pre-built solutions that address known public sector problems, these can be bought through AWS Marketplace, which is full of solutions built by our partners. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Mike, we've got a question in the chat. What is the best option for an alternative to VMware? Oh, Christ, let's stop recording the call. Colin, do you want to have a go at that one first?
Oh yeah, you always go for the best option. And to be perfectly honest, my answer to this is always going to be, this is unique to yourself. You know, at the end of the day, I could say EVS could be an alternative option, or Nutanix NC2, or native AWS EC2 instances, or complete migration. All of them are valid and best options for a different type of customer. I'll definitely show you one in the case study just in a bit, but let's take an example from here. You're looking at speed to move across. You already have VMware on premise. You're already very skilled up on there, and you've got a deadline of, let's say, in the next 6 months, you have to be out of your data center. I say the best option for you would be EVS. It wouldn't be one of the other options. Well, let's flip that on its head. Say you're a Nutanix customer, you've got full Nutanix on premise, and you need to move quickly, and you have some very specific configuration within your Nutanix cluster that needs to be migrated. Well, then and Nutanix is your best way forward. What if you've got speed and that you actually want to learn at the same time as well? I'd say go for a hybrid style option as well, where you can move, say, from VMware to EVS or NC2, Nutanix to NC2, but at the same time, you could find a couple of, during the discovery, that some of your applications are already designed to work quite happily in the cloud. So why not take the opportunity to move them across? And if it works, go from there. So best option is always unique to your individual circumstances and your individual side of things. But I'd say all in all, the best option is always going to be native AWS, to be perfectly honest, because you're going to get that. But I'm biased because I'm an AWS person and someone that has worked on it for a long time. So that's my rambling answer. I hope that helps.
That's great. Sorry, Mike. Mike, anything on that one, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the advantages we've seen customers using OGVA for. So we've got about 105 customers across the 2 tiers of OGVA. And out of those, about 17 are using the sort of proof of concept credits to do various types of experiments. But I know one of them is trying a Nutanix migration. So to kind of be even more purist about it, you can actually try some of these different ones out in a kind of a low cost, low risk way to see, you know, once we've moved the thing over, how easy it is for us to operate it. Is there anything we didn't think of before you make that full commitment to kind of go, we'll move our whole estate over. And it's good to see that we are seeing customers actively doing this now and using those credits to fund those types of experiments in VMware migrations.
I think
we've seen something similar on Colin on NC2, and we've had how many? We've probably got 4 at the moment. 1 university, 3 NHS trusts. Really come to us to look at DR as an option, but it's kind of become a bigger assessment really in terms of a lot of the changes that are going on. One of their key outputs is they want to basically look for DR. So within that, as Colin mentioned before around the POC, we've stood up a number of different various POCs, including NC2 and Nutanix POC, including other POCs around DR. So I think what is great with AWS is that the funding models tend to fit quite well. So the POC funding model, the map assess or OGVA stuff, but also when they don't fit perfectly, there's also avenues for kind of exception as well, to support you. So yeah, I just want to say, look, I think within whatever conversation you want to have with us post this call, you know, we'll include AWS, but I think, you know, and could include some real kind of like great quick value around POCs and assessments, because I think that's what we're seeing at the moment. Sorry, Matt, we interrupted your flow.
No, it's okay. This may be the last slide anyway. What if you move us on one?
Yep.
Yes, we are. That was me done on OGVA. Obviously, any questions, you can either reach out to me or the folks at Expert Thinking as well. I'm there to support them and support you. So, and we can go into much more detail if needed.
Oh, actually, as a nice segue from you, Michael, thank you for saying, you know, about the partner side of things. Well, this is kind of where I want to sort of come back to where our value add comes into play here, is that, you know, within Expert Thinking, we work in the verticals that we have the skills and knowledge that allow us to work with you. So public sector is one of the verticals we work with. So we hopefully understand that as much as you and are able to sort of work with you on that. And, you know, working with things like the OGVA and the MAP program funding, which is in this particular case, a partner funding program. So it's as us as a partner, it's in our best interest to ensure that you get the results you need. So we take the AWS mandatory outputs, which, to be honest, they're very key. They are required, and to be honest, they set a very good foundation for migration. But we take that one step further. We understand you as that vertical, and we add additional context, additional discoveries, if required, to your map assess side of things. So we take it one step further as a partner, because ultimately we want to see you win. We want to work with you as a partner throughout the same with AWS. You know, we want to work as partners to get you over the line from that. So, you know, we want this to be successful. You know, we want to be able to enhance what you receive so that you get the value out of what you're doing throughout this process as well. And it also allows that bit more of a bespoke approach. So, you know, going back to that sort of POC approach, if a POC is needed, that can be added. You know, we can decide and make that decision as part of our assessments, our talks. If you've decided no, cloud is the way forward and that's it, then fair enough, we can look into pilots as well. You know, the idea is that these can be added on as modules to all of this, and we can understand how this works with those many different funding programs and work with AWS and yourselves to bring that all together to ensure that huge value for yourselves on getting over the line. So as you can see, this is just a very simple table of here's everything in the, I call it the AWS mandatory version. They are still key. It's just, you say, we take it one step further from the mandatory version and able to produce something more bespoke to your needs moving forward from there. Cool. So here we go. So this one is our case study of a migration we actually did, surprisingly enough, from VMware Cloud on AWS into Nutanix NC2 with the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital. Now, VMC itself, between some of the licensing cost barriers, some of the changes in the way that Broadcom work, and specifically the criticality, some of the services that were needed to be hosted by the system, we need to come up with an option very quickly to move them into AWS. And we did this via a similar process as well. You know, we went in to assess the customer to understand their needs. We understood in this particular case, and this is what I'll probably do into a little bit of detail on, is one of the key technical requirements of this is that the IP address structure of their network on VMware Cloud needed to stay static. You know, the number of these servers are used by machines and equipment within the hospital itself that you don't really want to be mucking around with at short notice. You know, they needed speed, but without the problems of downtime. You know, they needed to be quick as possible, and we needed a flat networking structure out of this. So we looked at all of the options. You know, EVS at this particular time, it was still in preview, so it wasn't considered an option. We looked at going into AWS native itself, and we found that there were technical problems in doing that. So Nutanix in this particular case was an option because of their ability to talk directly to VMware itself and expand the network and have that process to migrate across. And with that requirement of speed came with the need to do this as quickly as possible. Now, like with all healthcare products, you're not going to sort of sit there, spin something up, away you go, and go for a migration. You're going to need to test this. So part of this process is that we worked from a POC. So we did a proof of concept first of all, got this all set up in a production capacity, which then led on to the pilot, which then led on to the actual migration that happened overnight. And there's a lot of text on this screen that talks about what we did and how we pulled it together. But we're talking about building up that landing zone, doing the security around it, getting it connected, ensuring that everything works. And what we ended up with a platform on AWS. It was aligned with the best practices, definitely around the well-architected framework as well. We've given them an option now to move out of VMware Cloud, so they didn't have that sudden licensing requirement, but also given them the pathway to modernization as well. We've been able to come out the back of it and say, well, now you've moved this over, let's talk about how we can modernize this moving forward as well. And that my entire migration project was worked with through us and another partner, Power of Three, as Ross talked about earlier, with another partner throughout this as well. So, this is something that happened live. It happened quite recently. So, yeah, that was a really good solution. And like you say, if anyone wants to ask any questions around this as well, please do feel free to ask. I'm happy to sort of talk about some of the key learnings in a bit more detail if there's any more on the need side of things, that kind of stuff as well. But honestly, if you do have any questions, ask away. I'll see back to Ross now.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks, Mike. I think we wanted to kind of have a little slot at the end for any Q&A. Don't be shy, and no questions silly. There is a question in the chat about which is how widespread is this problem, and is there an industry response? So I can only go from our experience, really. It's very widespread. I think you can see by the specific programs which have been put in place by AWS that there is a response. I think from just a practical point of view, we are seeing, say, about a 300% average in the renewal fees, but that is moving, right? I mean, and it's moving up. If you look at some of the core license requirements now for VMware, that problem's only going to get worse. Not to say VMware and the Broadcom isn't a great, obviously it's a great technology, it's a brilliant technology, and I think for the large commercial space, I think it's still working really well for them. But I think there is a line in the sand that's been drawn, really, in terms of carrying on investing, carrying on upskilling, and carrying on kind of swallowing that increasing cost, or to look for alternatives. And I think that this webinar really was about what are those alternatives, and what we can do. And there's another question there, which might be more of you, Colin. We've got quite a few people proficient in VMware. What do I do about keeping them and developing their new skills if we move from VMware? It's a great question.
Yep, sorry, start again. So that's the skills question. Yeah, I think the one thing that we do slightly within expert thinking to ensure that's the case is that we look at you. We come in and identify what skills you currently have within your organization. We want to understand what your base level is, and that's not to judge you as a company on where you are, but it's just to set that baseline. And the idea behind the assess and the mobilize phases is to use those two particular phases within the map side of things to work out where you need to go. Look at your pathway forward. It could be along the lines of professional training. It could be side by side working together to bring the system up and skilling up on the side. But we use that as well to make the decision on the pathway that your products are going to do as well. So we don't expect you to understand AWS on day one. We'd love everybody to be able to do that. But what we try and do is we ensure that we bring you along that journey. Our delivery teams will sit with you, talk to you, and discuss what we're doing. We become part of your team. And I know Ross always hates me for saying this, but my delivery teams want to make ourselves redundant by the end of it. We want to come out of this that you're capable of running your infrastructure as good as you were running it on your on-premise as well. And for a lot of people who are so used to that sort of on-premise sort of way of thinking, this is just an evolution of their skills. It's not actually trying to replace them or their people. It's a good way forward. And definitely for me, and this is my own personal experience as well, I've come from the data center world. And for me, knowing how the data center itself works gives me much more of a fundamental understanding of how cloud works, because there is so much of that knowledge that still applies within the cloud and why things happen. You know, in the event that something happens in the cloud, knowing how a data center works actually helps you very quickly bring that up. So you don't see it as a replacement of your skill, but see it as an enhancement of a pre-existing skill, something you're already good at on premise as well.
Thanks, Colin. That's a good answer. Mike?
I mean, I just add to that if even if you go for the scalar of OGVA, that also provides access to Skill Builder as well. So you've got basically a cost-free way of funding the training of new staff as well in that space. So that's complementary to that. And I think I just 100% agree with what Colin says. I always say to people, you want to look for partners who create capability, not dependency. So creating that capability is really important. Just stepping back to the other question, just some numbers. So there's 85 million VMware workloads worldwide. Surprisingly, 90% of those are still on-prem though. So yes, it is certainly a widespread problem. Within the context of the UK public sector, we see it across all kind of sub-verticals. And there are some really large kind of estates in central government, but in healthcare, local government, education, it's there everywhere. So yeah, we can't get away from it. It's a widespread thing. In terms of sort of industry responses, I'm having some interesting conversations with Crown Commercial Service around how can we help solve this once, and how can we get some scaled programs together to try and unlock kind of more funding and support to help with some of the migrations away from it. So if anyone on the call is aware of any kind of large estates or can pull together almost like a consortium, then obviously speak to Ross, and then we can actually help bring some more funding to that. We're partway through doing one with one of the large Whitehall departments at the moment, who've got a significant VMware estate, about 80% in cloud, about 20% on-prem, but we've been able to unlock a lot of the funding to do that migration for them because of the sheer size of it. So scale can bring more funding from an AWS perspective, but we're also trying to work with UK government centrally to see if we can kind of have some kind of playbook or something that helps people address this, and not everyone sitting in their own little silos fretting about it.
Thanks, Mark. Great. Any other questions before we finish a little early? Let one have a coffee and probably drag ourselves into an 11 o'clock meeting. So let's give a couple of seconds. Well, at least we've had a few. That's good. I've been on many of these webinars where everyone, like I say, it's kind of like a silence. But sorry, we do have another one. How are organisations building a business case? The cost increases are high, but business as usual. How do you get project funding since you have the same infrastructure? Well, that's a great question. So number one is, when you say organisations building a business case, we are working around building those business cases with the organisations. So I think please reach out if that's if you're at that stage. We've got one of the largest county councils at the moment. We're working with tirelessly over this and probably the next 2 or 3 weeks building their business case, and right down to looking at their on-premise costs, looking at previous purchases, etc., against what it might look like in a number of different environments. So they say the cost increases are high, but business as usual. How do you get project funding? Well, that's really interesting, because actually looking at the MAP program, Colin, that's a really great question. That fits definitely within OGVA or within the MAP piece. So project funding in terms of getting you from the assessment says mobilized phase migration, actually has been really significant from AWS recently. So again, very happy to get into the numbers with that. We need very little detail initially to give you a very high level view on what ourselves and AWS can kind of do to support that. And of course, that builds into a business case in terms of the project cost or capital expenditure needed to move to the cloud. And then versus that, there's a huge amount of support in terms of credits and a huge amount of support in terms of the ongoing costs. But it's a great question, and I've probably answered it to half a degree in terms of my approach. But Colin, Mike, it's anything from you for that question?
So, Mike, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean,
Go
I
first,
just echo. Yeah, the programs like MAP and the other ones are essentially designed to flatten out that kind of bump that we all see. And yeah, and I love the language there. Yeah, I've just put a lot of effort, and I'm now just running the thing somewhere else, type of thing. So those business cases are always hard because it's hard to show business value because you're essentially usually mitigating risks or modernising technology. But I think the whole purpose of most of our programs that we work with the partners is to flatten that curve down by providing funding for the partner to do the heavy lifting, quite literally, so that you can basically take your precious business applications from A to B. You can then have them at B, and then you have a chance to actually modernize them, open up the data to do those other things. You don't really want to invest a lot of time, skills, or money in the process of moving it. So those programs are designed to fund people like expert thinking to actually carry out that part of the process for you and remove that kind of cost barrier.
There's a question about an OLA in there, Colin, which is someone knows what they're talking about in terms of AWS funding programs. So would you build a business case via an OLA? I have an opinion there. So Colin, do I just give yours in terms of what OLA gives us versus what we think a map assess business case will probably give us?
Yeah, I think Ross, you're now on the same page now. I think looking at the OLA, it's that quick, immediate sort of assessment. It is meant to be very impactful in a very quick way forward. It doesn't go as depth as you need, but it gives us an opportunity to look into those licensing options and what we can do, not just from licensing perspective. Well, OLA is about optimization in other categories as well. So, we look at that from an immediate, what does that look like from a lift and shift perspective, and where can we make that immediate savings? What that actually allows us to do is it very nicely then takes us into the map assess process, because it allows us to sort of get additional time with you before we start that sort of map process as well. And that information is really valuable for that wider, deeper assess. So we're not coming in completely blind into that. So definitely an OLA is a starting point, and it's a very quick way to get started versus assess. But we and this is where, as a partner, we come in and have a look at the options. We'll look to eventually link them all together into that process. So you can start with an OLA that can quickly get you into the assess, to quickly get you an answer. And the whole point of MAP being the migration acceleration program is we accelerate you. So we just look at that as another accelerator to your process as well.
Perfect.
There was a question about how do you get to the credits and stuff like that. I've just suggested if they reach out to you, Ross, then I can help you take people through how that works.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but it's relatively straightforward at the scalar level. It takes days, not months.
Yeah.
Prime is a bit more involved, but if you're just looking for sort of $25,000 or less, scalar's quite quick and easy to do.
Yeah.
But whoever that is, if you reach out to Ross, I can support with that if needed.
Yeah, we found that really simple. We do a lot of POCs in the visual compute space. So and actually we've had that kind of level of credits and more just assigned by the account managers. So there's definitely quick ways to get you credits and sandboxes to kind of have a play. And there's also we also are really quite good at accessing the right level of funding with the right program for the right support. Okay, so I'm just aware everyone's got just like me 11 o'clock. So please post any of the questions in the chat or the Teams chat, or reach out to me. I'm just going to get to this final slide, which has contact details on. Just leave it there for a second. But in essence, it's pretty simple. So it's expert-thinking.co.uk, and then myself or Colin's first name with a dot in the middle. So LinkedIn, they're all there as well. And I hope everyone enjoyed the webinar. It's great that it was so proactive at the end. And it'd be great to carry on these conversations, show some more examples and myself and Mike and Colin, we're always open to any chats around the market and kind of where we think this is going. Thanks, everybody. Mike,
Thanks,
Colin,
everyone.
appreciate it.
No
Take care.
problem. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.
Have a good day.
Cheers all.
Cheers.